Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex issues, give you a clearer picture. Today we're getting into something that really hits home here in the Netherlands. Education. Picture this. University intro week. You expect excitement, right? But what you actually see is students sleeping in tents at Utrecht Central Station because they have nowhere else to go. Yes, actual tents with places set up for them to sleep and shower. It's quite an image, especially when you think back. It used to be, well, pretty easy to find student housing. We're working from insights from an expert today who remembers finding a room back in, 1985?
That's right. In Leiden, Groenhovenstraat. Found it through a newspaper ad during the Ghent festivities in July. Simple as that. Lived there 11 years.
11 years. See? That's how much things have changed. So our mission today is to really explore this worrying state of education in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
From higher ed right down to primary schools. We're going beyond the headlines, looking at the layers, the data, the solutions being talked about, all based on someone who's been, frankly, sounding the alarm for years.
Yeah.
We want to understand not just what's up, but why it matters so much for everyone.
Exactly. And that scene you painted, the student housing chaos, it's a very clear symptom of much bigger problems in the system. Students in tents at Utrecht Central. That happens when the whole education setup is under, frankly, unacceptable pressure.
So it's not just bad luck for a few students. It's a sign, a symptom that the system itself is strained, maybe past its limit.
Oh, absolutely. A very visible symptom. That ease of finding a room back in '85, completely gone. We have a general housing shortage anyway, right? Across the country. That affects everyone. But then you add this huge increase in student numbers. Over 100,000 international students now.
Wow, 100,000. That's a massive number to absorb.
It is. And this influx, combined with what I see as a really one-sided focus on just quantity, just numbers in education, well, that's led to this extreme housing pressure. It's gotten so extreme that some university programs now have like 70–80% international students. The system just can't handle that properly. And you have to ask if it's even desirable for, the balance of our own education system.
Okay, so student housing is like the tip of the iceberg for higher education. But you're saying this runs much deeper. It affects the whole Dutch education picture.
Yes. My assessment, and I'll be blunt, is that the overall state of Dutch education is bad. Outright bad, and very, very worrying. And look, this isn't something that just happened overnight. It's a decline. It's gotten much worse over the last, say, 20 to 30 years. My organization, Better Onderwijs Nederland, we founded that back in 2006, precisely because we were already concerned then, especially about things like language skills.
Okay, language skills. You mentioned alarming data there, the literacy numbers.
Yeah.
They sound pretty stark. Can you walk us through that?
It really is a crisis. Functional illiteracy, right? That means someone who can't really read a newspaper properly, struggles with longer words, complex sentences. The trend is, well, it's terrifying. Back in 2000, it was maybe 1 in 10 people. By 2006, when we started Better Onderwijs Nederland, it was 1 in 7. Then after 2010, it just took this enormous plunge. By 2019, 1 in 4. And the latest figures from 2022, a shocking 1 in 3 15-year-old students here in the Netherlands. Insufficient reading skills.
Hold on, just so we're crystal clear for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Are these primarily kids who've recently arrived? Or are we talking about children who've been through the Dutch school system?
That's the crucial point. While, yes, students with a migration background are overrepresented, these figures mostly reflect Dutch children, kids who've gone through our system their whole lives, and the implication is critical. 1 in 3 15-year-olds can't properly read their own textbooks. Think about that. They just can't access the material they need for their education. It's a homegrown crisis, not just an integration issue.
That's staggering. That impacts everything, doesn't it? Society, the economy. So how? How did we end up here? What went wrong systemically? Policy mistakes.
It's a mix of interconnected failures, really. First off, teacher training. It's just not sufficient. The quality of the PADUs, our primary teacher training colleges, it's a major worry. And there's this neglect of what you could call responsible didactics, specifically explicit direct instruction, the classic methods, showing how something is done, repeating it, practicing, drilling, the basic ways you make sure students actually master core skills. These have been pushed aside.
So the very foundation, how teachers are taught to teach, is shaky. Does that mean kids are just getting passed along without hitting the mark?
Unfortunately, yes, that's a huge part of it. These student tracking systems we have now, they mean kids often aren't held back anymore. There isn't really a final level per class that you must reach to move on. And the consequence is dire. Kids with language problems just get moved up through the system. They can reach secondary school reading like a 7-year-old. Imagine trying to cope with secondary school work reading at that level. It's impossible.
And vocational education.
Yeah.
The MBO you mentioned earlier, is the same story there?
Oh, absolutely. The quality level in MBO, our intermediate vocational track, has been, well, enormously abandoned, is how I'd put it. This hits our practical professions hard, the skilled trades we rely on. We've sort of lost respect for solid craft-based training. My organization, we argue strongly for bringing back quality vocational schools, like the old LTS, the lower technical school. Real focus on skills.
Right, okay. But here's the bit that feels so counterintuitive. All this decline is happening while funding has gone through the roof, right? That's a huge paradox.
It is a profound paradox. The money.
Yeah.
It's just exploded, around 21 billion euros back in 2000 now. It's nearly 55 billion euros. Even if you adjust for inflation, that's still a 54% increase. And get this, there are 70,000 more people working in education now compared to 2010.
70,000 more staff. So more money, way more people. Surely student numbers must have gone up too.
Nope, that's the kicker. In that same time frame, student numbers in primary and secondary education actually fell by 180,000. So let's recap. Fewer students, many more staff, vastly more money.
And much worse results.
Precisely. It makes no logical sense if you just look at the inputs.
What about teacher pay? That comes up a lot. People say teachers aren't paid enough. Is that the problem here?
That's a really common misconception. But no, it's not the core issue. Teacher salaries here are actually quite decent. Starters can earn 15–16% more than comparable jobs elsewhere, and there have been big raises in the last 5 years especially. So low pay isn't the driver of these problems. And what's fascinating here is, look, this isn't just about throwing money at the problem, you see. More money can actually become part of the problem itself.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So if it's not just money, what else is going on? What other pressures are piling onto schools and contributing to this decline?
Well, you know, schools are being asked to do more and more things that aren't really their core job. It distracts them. They're supposed to teach about obesity, terrorism, fitness, this thing called realistic math. The list goes on. And look, things like bullying are important. Of course they are. But all these extra tasks, they take time and focus away from the absolute basics. Teaching kids to read, write, and count properly, basic education.
It sounds like schools are turning into, I don't know, social service hubs almost. And you've also talked about an authority crisis. What do you mean by that in the classroom?
Yes, a Gaza crisis, an authority crisis. It leads to a lack of what we used to call Rust, Reinheit, Enreglement, Kies, cleanliness, regularity, order, basically. These modern teaching trends, like constant group work, they often just create restlessness. Kids struggle to concentrate. And then you've got the whole technology thing, the telephone youth, we sometimes call them. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, talks about this big spike in psychological problems in kids over the last decade or so. Phones are a huge factor there, in the classroom too.
And I guess what's happening at home spills into the classroom too.
Absolutely. Home issues, socioeconomic background, sometimes cultural or religious factors, they all play out in the classroom dynamics. And crucially, there's this growing problem with parents. Some are incredibly demanding. They threaten lawsuits. Sometimes they're even violent. They set a terrible example. And school boards, often they're just scared of bad press, scared of legal action. So they don't back their teachers enough. Teachers feel exposed.
That's a really difficult environment to teach in. So with all this extra money sloshing around and these systemic issues, you mentioned a wild growth of consultants. Where's the money going?
Exactly. A huge chunk goes to this wild growth of consultants. We estimated around, 61,000 to 65,000 education consultants working in the system in 2022. And then there's private tutoring, around 40,000 companies providing it. And this just makes inequality worse, doesn't it? Wealthier families, your Hendrik, Jan, and Mariette types, as we sometimes say here.
Right, shorthand for more affluent families.
Yeah, they can afford the extra help. But others, the Ahmed and Dalis or the Ingrid and Kimberlys, again, just examples, they either can't afford it or maybe their parents just don't have the capacity or interest. So you get this two-tier system. It really undermines public education, widens the gap.
Okay, so if we drill down then, the core underlying problem seems to be how schools are funded and how that leads to standards being dropped.
That's exactly it. That's the fundamental issue. Schools get money based on student numbers. Simple as that. So the whole system becomes driven by quantity, by finance, not quality. It encourages these huge school mergers, which often just dilute the quality further, and it means schools lower their admission standards. The Lat word, laaggelegd, we say the bar is lowered. They let students in even if they're not really ready for that level, like some students going into HAVO or senior general secondary level, and the result is this downward pressure. VMBO, the pre-vocational track, can sometimes just become a dumping ground for kids who struggle elsewhere.
So the main goal becomes just keeping students moving through the system, rather than making sure they've actually learned what they need to.
Precisely. The system rewards through-flow doorstream much more than it rewards maintaining high final standards. And here's a critical failure. The inspection bodies. They're just not monitoring these final achievement levels properly, especially in the MBO colleges, the ROCs, but also in HBO, the applied universities, and even traditional universities. And this loops back to teacher quality, too, because if the system is weak overall, even newly trained teachers coming out are often, frankly, substandard. And I have to say it again, forcefully, pouring more money in is not the solution. It just feeds this wild growth of other activities, consultants, bureaucracy. It doesn't fix the core quality issue.
Okay. So if money isn't the fix, and the system is geared towards quantity, how should we think about education? What's its real purpose, if not just an economic engine?
At its heart, education should be culture overdraft, culture transfer, passing on knowledge, values, skills. It should be about instilling pride in a subject, a craft, fostering passion for learning, for mastery. Think about Dutch football, right? It's known worldwide. Why? Because you have deeply motivated people working in it. They're passionate about developing talent. There's strong quality control. Homegrown talent reaching world levels. That's a kind of mentality, a pride in excellence. And that's largely what we've lost in education.
That's a really interesting analogy. So how do we get that mentality back? What are the actual steps, the pathways to improvement?
Okay, several key things need to happen. First, we have to restructure the funding. We need something like Proposal C, which is a specific plan for reform. The basic idea is the government needs to know exactly how public money is being spent. Right now, honestly, it's unheard of how little oversight there is. The Education Council itself has warned about this. Funding needs to go more directly to the schools, the locations where teaching happens, not just disappear into huge administrative boards. Give schools more local control. Second, teacher training. We have to safeguard the quality of the PABOs. Make absolutely sure that proven teaching methods, like explicit direct instruction, are actually being taught and taught well.
Right, fix the foundation. Get back to basics in how we teach teachers. What about inside the classroom? The teachers and what they teach.
We need to bring back proper docent and subject specialists, real experts in math, language, history, whatever it is. We've drifted into these vague kind of hip educational forms, practice-oriented this, competency-based that, problem-driven learning. These often push out the subject specialists and focus too much on the student's experience instead of actual quality learning. Third, we need new, clear quality standards, and the inspectorate has to have the teeth and the will to actually enforce them rigorously at all levels. And finally, let's be clear about the government's role. The Constitution says the government must guarantee quality education. That's its job. This current situation, this misuse of public money with such very poor returns, it's just unheard of. It's unacceptable. And honestly, if the government can't beat a quality problem, you reach a point where you think, maybe they should just give the money to parents and let a market system sort it out. Now, let me be clear. I'm not actually advocating for that, but it shows how broken the current system is. That becomes a logical, if extreme, thought.
That really underlines the urgency, doesn't it? Saying the current system is so flawed, maybe no government system is better. So the stakes are incredibly high if these changes don't happen. What are the consequences of just carrying on like this?
Oh, the long-term impact on society. It'll be devastating. Kids who are poorly educated get frustrated. They struggle to read, write, participate fully. It leads to a disaster for the country. Not just economically, though, that will suffer massively, but socially, culturally. It affects our ability to innovate, to maintain social cohesion, even for democracy to function properly with informed citizens. It erodes everything.
Wow. This has been quite the deep dive. From students camping out at train stations to a third of teenagers unable to properly read their school books.
Yeah.
It forces a fundamental question, doesn't it? What is education for? It's clearly not just about getting a job or boosting GDP. You're saying it's the very core of your country, foundational for democracy, for society itself.
Exactly. And look, despite all the frustration, the weariness sometimes, that core belief, that's what keeps me and others at Better Onderwijs Nederland going. Because if you let education decay, you're basically accepting a decline for your own children, for the country's future. You can't just stand by. So we keep working. For those listening who want more detail, you can look up our 10-point plan, Better Onderwijs Nederland. There are concrete proposals there for how we can start turning this around.